Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating, decades-long clash between institutional authorities and L. Ron Hubbard's Dianetics movement.
Think about this for a second. How exactly does a simple pulp magazine article snowball into the largest infiltration of the U.S. government in history? I mean, it literally sounds like the plot of a Cold War spy thriller, right? But the historical record shows us a very real, very intense escalation, pitting brand new mental health claims against established scientific and government authorities.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to move chronologically, starting with the science fiction cure, then we'll look at the clash with the scientific method, followed by regulators protecting public health. After that, things take a wild turn into espionage and government raids, and we'll wrap up by exploring the legacy of untested claims.
Part 1. The Science Fiction Cure. From pulp magazines to promised miracles.
Let's rewind to May 1950. A brand new science of the mind hits the public, not in a medical journal, but right in the pages of astounding science fiction magazine. And they absolutely did not hold back on the marketing. They aggressively promised some truly sweeping results. We're talking permanent cures for psychosomatic ailments like ulcers, arthritis, asthma, you name it. Plus, they claim they could elevate people to a highly advanced superhuman mental state known as clear. Now, to grasp what Hubbard was actually claiming to cure here, we've got to talk about his concept of the engram. He essentially repurposed this term to describe traumatic cellular memories. Picture them as hidden moments of unconsciousness that record physical pain and painful emotions. According to Dianetics, these engrams were the absolute sole cause of all psychosomatic illnesses, and the only way to get rid of them, his unique auditing therapy.
But as you might guess, the public and the media were immediately skeptical of these massive medical claims. A 1952 cartoon from Imagination magazine actually compared Dianetics to Hadacol. Now, if you aren't familiar with it, Hadacol was an incredibly controversial, heavily marketed patent medicine from that era. Basically, folks were instantly suspecting this was much more of a commercial fad than an actual medical breakthrough.
Moving on to Part 2. Clash with the scientific method. The burden of proof.
Here is the thing. When you make sweeping medical claims, you are on a crash course with the established medical and scientific communities. It's totally inevitable. Experts are quick to remind us that public health relies on the scientific method. It's a rigorous process demanding empirical proof, peer review, and independent testing before anyone accepts a new mental health theory. It's the essential baseline we use to protect citizens.
And that brings us to a total roadblock. Hubbard presented his findings as unverified, unchanging axioms that completely lacked independent laboratory testing. But the scientific method? Well, that requires evolving, peer-reviewed, empirical data. So when that concrete evidence just didn't show up, the friction really sparked.
The scientific backlash was immediate, and wow, was it severe. This scathing quote from the prominent physicist Isidore Isaac Rabi perfectly captures the mood at the time. He blasted Hubbard's work for having a complete and utter lack of empirical data, famously stating that it had more promises and less evidence per page than has any publication since the invention of printing.
Sticking to that scientific method, independent researchers really dug into these psychosomatic healing claims. In 1950, the American Psychological Association officially passed a resolution calling out the lack of empirical evidence. A few years later, in 1953, an independent study by Harvey J. Fisher concluded that Dianetics totally failed to resolve personality conflicts, and critics like semantics scholar S.I. Hayakawa pointed out that Hubbard was just using sci-fi linguistic techniques to dress up medical claims. They literally labeled it fiction science instead of actual research.
Which brings us to Part 3. Regulators protect public health. The government steps in.
I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a government health official for a second. Your primary mandate is modern medical ethics, right? You have to protect the public from dangerous, unsubstantiated treatments. So you have to ask yourself, how do you protect everyday citizens when unproven devices like e-meters and literal radiation-proof pills are being sold to them as medical breakthroughs?
This conflict certainly didn't just explode out of nowhere. It was a slow burn over several decades. We're talking professional rejection back in 1950, escalating to the IRS, yanking their tax-exempt status in 1958. Then it scales up to physical FDI raids in 1963, and eventually, it climaxes with massive FBI raids for espionage in 1977.
Let's zoom in on a few of those actions, because they are intense. In 1956, the FDA seized 21,000 illegal diazepam pills. Hubbard was claiming these things made people immune to radiation. Then, by 1963, the FDA seized 3 tons of e-meters in Washington, D.C. 3 tons. They claimed they were illegal medical devices. And this wasn't just happening in the U.S. Over in Australia, a board of inquiry actually labeled the practice an evil threat to the community.
Part 4. Espionage and government raids, paranoia and retaliation.
Now, instead of cooperating with these investigations, the movement responded with some unprecedented aggression. Hubbard's survival philosophy countered government scrutiny through an organizational directive known as the Fair Game Policy. This policy explicitly stated that enemies could be tripped, sued, lied to, or destroyed. And to enforce it, they built up a massive private intelligence network, using private investigators and endless lawsuits to systematically target and silence their critics and regulators.
The absolute climax of this retaliation was Operation Snow White. It sounds like a movie, but operatives systematically infiltrated the U.S. government. They literally got jobs as typists to secretly access the IRS and the Department of Justice. They burglarized offices, stole and photocopied tens of thousands of sensitive files detailing the movement's controversies. And when they finally got caught, their massive cover-up attempts triggered an unprecedented law enforcement response.
The fallout was huge, and the media was all over it, permanently altering public trust in the group. On July 7, 1977, 134 FBI agents raided the movement's headquarters in D.C. and L.A. They seized 48,000 government documents. In the end, 11 top officials, including Hubbard's own wife, Mary Sue, were sentenced to prison. Meanwhile, Hubbard himself fled into hiding as an unindicted co-conspirator.
And finally, Part 5. Legacy of untested claims, from therapy to religion. So, what is the ultimate legacy of this incredible historical clash? Well, there's just a startling contrast between Hubbard's grandiose promises and what actually happened. He promised superhuman intellect and guaranteed cures, but the public reality? It was mostly unmet expectations, an absolute lack of peer-reviewed scientific proof, severe financial drains for followers, and, as we saw, actual prison sentences.
Ultimately, the historical sources show us how the organization strategically adapted to survive this mess. Staring down financial ruin and government bans, they actively pursued what Hubbard himself called the religion angle. By rebranding their unverified self-help psychology into a tax-exempt religion, they were able to shield their practices from regulators like the FDA by utilizing the powerful legal protections of religious freedom.
And that leaves us with a pretty heavy, provocative thought. When medical claims can completely bypass peer review by hiding behind religious protections, who is ultimately responsible for protecting public health? It's a massive question about the balance between religious freedom and medical ethics. I really hope this explainer helped you untangle this incredible, highly complex piece of history. Thanks for joining me, and keep questioning the world around you.